Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Sweet Dreams seminar. I'm going to give a couple of minutes for people to join us because I know a lot of people come to these webinars on their lunch hour. So we'll give them a couple of minutes to extricate themselves from whatever they're doing and join us, and then we'll begin in just a few minutes' time. I'm watching the ticker tick upwards, and I know we have 240 people registered for this webinar. So I think I'm going to wait till we get to we're coming up.
It is.
Sorry, go ahead, Jan.
No, no, I said dangerous if you're going to say your target,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. No, no, I'm not going to wait for 240, but we're slowly climb. Well, we're not slowly. We're quite fast climbing towards 100. So I think I might give it just and we're only at 12:01, so I think I might give it a minute or two longer. Um, It's my favorite Portuguese phrase. The Brazilians have a very touching belief in the British. They have this phrase, "Punctualidade britânico," meaning 9 o'clock on the dot, British punctuality. And I keep pointing out to them that I do a lot of work globally, and the British are among the least punctual people I know in the world. But it doesn't put the Brazilians off. They keep saying it. So it's very touching that there's a few positive stereotypes remain around the world. While everybody is waiting, I see 39 people have voted in our Slido poll. If you can all see the Slido poll there, if you just click on it and vote for us and tell us how many hours of sleep you get a night, we're going to ask you a couple of other questions too. Um, so if anybody's having trouble with the Slido poll, let us know in the chat. But I think you should all see the Slido poll there. And if, yeah, we're up to 47 votes there now, so that's great. Um, Natasha raised her hand. Natasha, do you want to let us know? I can see. Great. Okay. We're at 101. So let's start. Fantastic. Great to have you all with us. Welcome to this webinar, Sweet Dreams, the Importance of Good Sleep for Healthy Aging. I'm Mark Chataway. I'll be moderating the event today. Um, Great to have you with us. As you probably know, this is a webinar run by the International Longevity Centre UK in partnership with the University of Surrey's Centre of Excellence here, the Centre of Excellence on Aging at the University of Surrey. And I'll be introducing Dirk Jan from the University of Surrey in a minute. So marvelous to be doing this in partnership with the university. And this is part of a longer series of webinars. And so we'd like to thank all of the partners in that series of webinars who you see on this page here. Um, I work for a consultancy company called Fin Partners in the UK, and my interests are very much in healthy aging, in the way we as a society prosper, and find ourselves fulfilled as we grow older and as we stay healthy. And I've done a lot of work in this area and a lot of work in the area of sleep, starting back in the era when we routinely used benzodiazepines to treat insomnia. through to now, where we are in a slightly better place. So I have a long interest in this. My interest is principally from the communications and policy side. I'm joined by a wonderful panel. Let me briefly outline who our panel are. Professor Dirk-Jan Dijk is the Professor of Sleep and Physiology, the Director of the Surrey Sleep Research Centre at the University of Surrey. Professor Dijk is going to give us an overview on sleep and its implications for healthy aging. Then Ben Lumley is with us. Ben is the co-head of program at Nightclub. Nightclub specializes in the design and delivery of social purpose programs for people who work at night. So it's working across the criminal justice, public health, housing, and public service sectors, looking at shift work and at other people who work at night. And then we're joined by a trustee of the ILC and a former partner at Mercer in the HR consulting industry, Yvonne Sonsino. Yvonne joins us principally because of her HR expertise and skill, but also, as she let us know, because of during her working life, she emulated Mrs. Thatcher and slept 4 hours a night. And now in retirement, she's finding the benefits of sleep. So Yvonne has a personal interest here as well. And then Jessie Culler is joining us. She is the Senior Public Affairs and Stakeholder Engagement Manager at Drinkaware. Jessie is going to talk to us about alcohol and sleep. I know a lot of people think that alcohol helps sleep. In fact, the evidence suggests that it does exactly the opposite. So Jessie's going to talk to us a bit about that and about how the use and abuse of alcohol affects our sleep. So, as you can see, a great panel. And then we're aiming to leave a good deal of time at the end for Q&A and discussion. So please be ready with your thoughts and your questions for that session. Lovely. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to ask Dirk-Jan to start us off. Dirk-Jan is a globally recognized expert in sleep, and he's going to give us an overview of sleep and healthy aging.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be here. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm going to say a few things about sleep and aging, myths and facts, and maybe some other things. You see the sweet dreams with the exclamation mark there as well. We're currently funded by a number of organizations, UK Dementia Research Institute in particular, and we have here the Center of Excellence on Aging here at the University of Surrey as well. Next slide, please. So facts, questions, myths, solutions. What I'm going to tell you is that you already know we value sleep more than, and what are the other things? What makes a good night's sleep? Myths, older people are sleepy. Myth 2, long sleep is a sign of good health. Solution 1, technology for longitudinal monitoring of. Next slide, please. So these are data published now quite a few years ago, but quite interesting because it's clear that Sainsbury doesn't sell sleep, so they don't have a conflict of interest here. If a sleep researcher tells you that sleep is important, why would you believe them? Because sleep is their job, and they certainly won't tell you that it's not important. Sainsbury doesn't sell sleep, but they did this research looking at quality of life and living well, and what are the characteristics of people living well and people not living so well. And this is a comparison of the top and the bottom 20 responses of those 8,250 participants. And if you go from the bottom to the top, overdue debts are not important at all for living well. Socializing, spending time outdoors, economic activity, some of it is getting more important. Mental health is pretty important. Sex life satisfaction is number 3. Support network is number 2. And sleep quality is number 1. And actually, that is a pretty consistent finding in the literature. If you want to know how somebody is, ask them, how do you sleep? If they are satisfied with their sleep quality, they are usually doing pretty well. Next slide, please. Then, of course, you want to know, what makes a good night's sleep. So what you can do is you can bring your participants, healthy participants, of all ages here between 20 and 84 to the lab and record their sleep physiology with electrodes on their head and elsewhere. And you can quantify all the various sleep stages, deep sleep, REM sleep, awakenings. And then in the morning, you ask them, how well did you sleep? And then you can see, are there any aspects of sleep physiology that predict your subjective quality of sleep? We go to the next slide. Actually, we see that REM sleep, having a lot of REM sleep, has a positive impact on your perception of the quality of your sleep. A number of awakenings, and these are short awakenings, many you won't remember, has a negative impact. That's a kind of a nice finding. And certainly the number of awakenings finding is very consistent. The other consistent thing is that deep sleep actually doesn't really contribute to your subjective experience of sleep. And everybody talks about the importance of deep sleep, deep sleep, deep sleep. But when you really start looking at it, what is the evidence for its importance? You can certainly find arguments to say REM sleep or sleep continuity are as important. So that's one thing. Next slide. So what about sleepiness and aging, and what are some of the myths and ideas around this? Older people are sleepy. You see them napping. Typical for aging. Obviously, we are against ageism, and we are really trying to tell people what is going on really in healthy aging, and what is going on when you're aging and you're not so healthy. So one myth out there, maybe older people are sleepy people. Well, one thing to do is simply ask them, how sleepy are you? Okay. And you can use the Karolinska sleepiness scale, which is a self-report. Number 9 is very sleepy, great effort to keep fighting sleep. 5 is neither alert nor sleepy, and 1 is extremely alert. Now, if you do this in a large group of people, next slide, you will see that, click, yeah, that if you look at the different age groups, you see that the young people are the sleepy people, 20 to 29. And that's actually a very consistent finding. It's the young people who also struggle to stay awake at night. Older people are much better at it. If you have to, choose between a young or an old driver on a bus for your children on a trip to France, never choose the young driver, because the young driver is likely to fall asleep. If you look at these data and you present this, one of the responses you will get, oh, these older people don't know how sleepy they are. Okay, typical. So older people don't really know how they feel, etc. Next slide. So you can now measure this objectively. How long does it take people to fall asleep during the daytime? Okay. How easy is it for them to take a nap? Older people apparently nap a lot, so they should fall asleep very fast. So here we're looking at the multiple sleep latency test. So less sleepy means it takes longer to fall asleep during your daytime nap. And you see that these young people, they drop off within 10 minutes. Yeah, they are sleepy. The older people, 60 to 69, 70 to 84, take much longer. So it's the young people who are the nappers. It's the young people who are sleepy during the day, not the healthy older people. And the message here is, if you're older and you are sleepy, then maybe you're not healthy. Maybe you have a sleep problem, or maybe you have another medical problem, and there is data to support that particular idea. Next slide, please. So can we go to yeah. Now, what about sleep duration, sleep need, and how long can you sleep? If you click one more, Patrick, then yeah, and another one, okay? What you can do is, this is a study we did quite a few years ago. You can ask people to stay in bed for 16 hours per day. Rather than staying out of bed for 16 hours, they stay in bed for 16 hours. 12 hours approximately at night, and another 4 hours during the day. So ample opportunity to sleep. And you do this for 7 days, okay? And now you see how long people can sleep. And you do this in older people, 18 we have here, and younger people, 35, okay? Now, if you see that over time, there is this asymptote, yeah? So there is a stable level of the maximum, that's the top panel of total sleep time. And you see that the younger people, get 8.9 hours of sleep out of the 16 hours in bed. So their maximum capacity for sleep is close to 9 hours. For the older people, it's only 7.4 hours, 1.5 hours less. Okay. Now, that's certainly the maximum capacity for sleep. I think this also translates to the need for sleep. People in their 20s may think that they can get away with 7 to 8 hours. Not true. They probably still need between 8 and 9 hours. Older people, they really don't need that 8 hours on average. Yeah. And actually, this is one of the problems. People get obsessed with getting their 8 hours of sleep. But if their maximum capacity is only 7 hours, they're going to lie awake in bed and they're going to be frustrated with lying awake in bed. That's why we need to get some good data about the physiology of sleep in healthy aging so that we are able to send out the correct messages to the public. Next slide, please. So what happens actually, and now you are an older person and you sleep very long. Is that a good sign or is this a bad sign? And there is an extensive literature on that, certainly in the area of dementia. How does time in bed duration or sleep duration relate to brain function, and how does it, for example, predict deterioration of brain function? So what you're looking at here is a plot of longer sleep. So the more you are to the right, the longer you sleep. And on the vertical axis, you see poor short-term memory. Yeah, so poorer is lower. Okay, and you see red dots and blue dots and green dots. The green dots are the controls, the blue dots are people with mild cognitive impairment, and the red dots are people with Alzheimer's. And what you actually see, and we measured this over several days, 14 days approximately, and what you see is that longer sleep is actually associated with poorer memory performance. And there is a huge literature on this. So if you are starting to sleep longer and longer, this usually means that there is some kind of a health problem. In this particular case, a brain problem. So long sleep can very well be an indication of poor health. That's another message we should get across and not only focus on very short sleep. Next slide, please. And then finally, we want to know about sleep and how it relates to health and aging. We can't do everything in the lab. So what we are currently doing is evaluating many, many different approaches to measure sleep. And there are wearables, there are earables you put in your ear, as the name suggests. There are nearables, these are things you put on your bedside table. We can take blood samples, we can have momentary assessment on your phone, and we have interventions. And that's an area we're currently working on very hard to better quantify those associations between sleep, health, and aging. Next slide, please. And actually, when you do this and you put these sleep technologies together with a whole bunch of other sensors in the homes of people, you can really start looking at the associations between the bedroom environment, the light environment, and the sleep patterns and physiology. And if you look on the right, you see, these blue actigrams, which are recordings over several years. On the top, you see 2019, and at the bottom, you see 2022. So now you can really do longitudinal recordings. And here you see recordings in 5 people living with dementia. And if, for example, you look at PLWD2, the second one, you can see that there indeed, you see as time goes by, you see this increase in time in bed, which obviously relates to that previous point I made about long sleep duration and deterioration of health. Next slide, please. And this work, of course, wasn't done by me, by the many people working here in Surrey, but also at the DRI Care Research and Technology Center at Imperial. And that's where I want to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Derek. Yeah, and that was absolutely fascinating. I have to say, one of my key skills is being able to have a nap when I want, but that probably comes from sleep deprivation when I was younger.
Sure.
But I think it hasn't. I think probably I'm less good at it now than I was when I was 25. So I think you're probably right, actually. Yeah.
What do you mean, probably?
So if anybody would like to comment or just use the Q&A or the question, if you can all see it in your Slido app there, use the Q&A and the question. The great thing is if you post a question in there or a comment, other people can vote on it. So we'll make sure we address it. And Isabel, I see you raised your hand. I think the best thing is to post your comment or question there if you would. That's probably the best way to handle it in a webinar here, because in a webinar here, we can't come directly to you for a comment. But if you do have comments or questions, we'll try to handle some of them as we go along and some of them right at the end. So, Dirk-Jan, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much. Really, really interesting insights. And I think it does go to combat the idea. Again, my brother, who's a bit younger than me, was told by his GP, oh yes, well, it's normal for older people to feel a bit sleepier. So these misconceptions have worked their way through the healthcare system, unfortunately. Um, Ben, I think you've got a challenge now. Dirk Jan says, if you have a choice of whether to get a younger or an older bus driver, you pick the older one every time. So I trust that will be in the nightclub work pack very soon.
Well, it's a great intro, thank you. And hi everyone. So I'm from Nightclub, and we are essentially a social enterprise specialized around sleep and shift work and night work, and trying to basically improve the health, well-being, engagement, and productivity of people who work at night. And it was set up in partnership with the Sleep and Circadian Neuroscience Institute, which is part of the University of Oxford, because as we've been saying, there's so much that there is to kind of communicate about sleep that is often not known. And these are just some photos which show kind of nightclub in action, because one of the biggest things we do is basically bring really immersive interactive training to different workplaces. So sleep experts are coming to site at night to help employers and night workers, really figure out how to thrive. And the reason why we do this is that there is a huge number of people working at nights. It's much larger than people often realize. It's 8.7 million, according to the ONS, who regularly work in the evening, early mornings, or indeed overnight. And we know that the sleep disruption that they experience is connected to all sorts of challenging outcomes for the individuals, but also for their employers. So sleep and circadian, disruption from working nights is connected to things like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, but it also plays out in people's kind of personal lives, putting pressure on them. You see this kind of very striking stat around kind of relationship breakdown, and also in the workplace. People are more likely to feel left out. They can be, less productive. You see higher accident rates at night. And the relationship with age is complex, and there's those who are more expert. But I suppose I would say one thing which we do see play out quite frequently is that people who have been able to cope with nights or rotating shifts often do, as they age, find there becomes a point where it becomes a higher stress on the body, which is kind of difficult to cope with, and sometimes to get into those kind of conversations around reasonable adjustments and so on. However, what I do want to emphasize is that it is not that working nights kind of condemns you to a bad outcome. It's rather that the environment makes it hard for you to get sufficient sleep, to have a good diet, to fit your exercise in, all those things which manage your risk. And this graph is essentially showing, in this case for diabetes, that even someone who's worked nights for 10 years, if they could get their sleep, diet, and exercise under control, those risk levels are lower even than someone who's got middling lifestyle behaviors, but who only works days. And so I just thought to draw attention to a couple of things that we talk to employers about to kind of build the picture of what we can really do about supporting people with their sleep in the workforce. And there's a few key areas. So it's things like scheduling, actually, how is that rota designed? There's things which are kind of more tolerable for people. So, for example, a forwards rotation, not some of the extremely long shifts that we see. It's very common to see 12 or 12 and a half hour shifts, among night workers. And so actually putting some of the kind of best practice into the rota design and also giving people clarity about what their shift is going to be. There's a big stress impact from people not knowing or having unpredictable shifts. There's something about the workplace environment. Often, leaders haven't necessarily seen what the place of work looks like at night, and is it actually, comfortable, warm, effective lighting? Are there rest areas? All those kind of considerations. Health and well-being is the particular kind of focus area of what we deliver with Nightclub in terms of trying to do that kind of preventative support to folks. And finally, things like nutrition. There's ways that you can kind of manage your energy levels, and obviously in relation to sleep, things like what's happening with people's caffeine or indeed our kind of alcohol consumption that helps them wind down. And finally, massive emphasis, and I know next week we'll talk a bit on this vein as well, but there's a big role for kind of leadership in the workplace here as well. Often sleep troubles for shift workers can be quite stigmatized. They might think it's a personal failure, and actually how can you change the culture, and how can leaders be really visible with their night shift? And finally, we do have a kind of campaign strand where we're trying to kind of influence policy, really to build some really basic visibility around night workers, their experiences, and things that we advocate for are to have kind of regular and actually specify as annual kind of health checks for those workers, for it to be clear where in government this issue sits, because it's sort of in many places or no places, and actually for more investment in government basically drawing on the kind of research and expertise that there is kind of out there. And finally, particularly for employers, but if others are interested, we have a whole host of kind of free resources up as well on our website, to help employers and employees around kind of thriving when working shifts. So that was just brief summary of it, and thank you so much for having me here, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Ben, and we appreciate the nighttime vibe on the slides as well. Really, yeah, it's great. Now we're getting lots of questions and comments in the Q&A. So Derkyan, Jack Eddy said, Stephen Fay said that even nightmares must be good for our perception of sleep quality, given that the amount of REM is a contributor to sleep quality, which I hadn't thought of, but there we are. He says, more seriously, would exploring the optimal conditions for lots of REM be an interesting study? And maybe Sainsbury's could sell the tools. I'm less sure Sainsbury's could sell the tools, but do we know what it is that promotes REM sleep? What kind of behaviors promote REM sleep?
Long sleep is certainly one way to get more REM sleep, and sleeping in the late morning is under control of the circadian clock. Nicotine probably promotes REM sleep because of the cholinergic mechanisms. And in terms of the nightmares, where Stephen was joking, nightmares are actually a negative predictor, and they are intense, frequent nightmares can be associated or can be a predictor of problems with brain health.
And I think also people who have nightmares tend to try and wake themselves up because they don't want. Yeah, exactly. Councillor Jill Sargent has a great question here. Is it good to take a nap? Actually, I'm going to ask you, Dekyan, and then I'm going to ask Ben the same question.
Well, it's a good question. If you look at the literature, some people say, "Oh, naps are good. Siesta culture is great." Well, siesta culture has more to do with temperature regulation than sleep regulation. Stay away from the heat in the afternoon. Now, whether naps are good or bad for you, there is a big difference between long naps and short naps. Yeah. If your naps are going to be 30, 40, 50 minutes long, probably something is not in order. If you're taking short naps, 20 minutes or whatever, 30 minutes, there are some positive correlates of these short naps, but it comes back to this issue of overall sleep duration. Long sleep can be an indicator of poor health. If you already sleep 8 hours or 9 hours at night and you need another 1 hour nap, well, something may not be in order.
Ben, what's the advice you give night workers about naps?
So exactly like Dick said, around the duration, often you'll know how good a nap was based on how you feel exiting it. And the reason for a very short nap is, you won't get into the kind of deeper part of the cycle, which when interrupted can be quite sort of, disruptive to people. I mean, with shift workers, often people are doing split sleeping as just a way of getting a sufficient quantity of sleep. So we're quite pragmatic about it. Often it will work for shift workers to sleep in 2 blocks. But it's sort of many sleep things are quite personal as to what works for you. But yeah, that's my head.
Yeah, because Robert Harris's novel, we all now know there used to be a big sleep and what was it? A big sleep and a small sleep, right? That people would sleep 3 hours, get up for a few hours, and then go back to sleep for another four or something. Dirk Jan does not approve.
That's a controversial interpretation of the historical records.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are some people who say, yes, there is evidence for that in the literature. There are a number of other people who believe that there is actually little evidence for that. So I don't think that that notion of the two sleeps is that well established. But this is one of the things that when people read about this, it's a very interesting idea. So it sticks in the minds of people very easily. But when you really start looking into it, it's not that clear at all. But I want to come back to Ben's comment, which I think I completely agree with. It is about a pragmatic management of your sleep need versus your sleep opportunity. Yeah. So if you can't sleep at night enough, yes, then a nap may be a good thing to do. But it's not that it's absolutely totally natural to take a nap. Yeah. It may be, as in shift workers, that they come home from the night shift, taking a sleep in the morning for a couple of hours, and then taking another sleep before they go on the night shift is a very sensible thing to do because it is about total sleep duration per 24 hours. So that's the kind of message I think we should get out.
I do hope nobody is talking to Travis Kelce, the future Mr. Taylor Swift, because he says he can't cope with less than 10 hours sleep a night. And based on what the two of you have said, he's not in good shape.
Well, maybe he's very young.
He is very young. He is quite young.
That's,
He is quite young. There is that. Listen, just before we go to Yvonne and Jesse, Caroline House has asked a super popular question here. It keeps getting upvoted, so I have to ask it. And it is actually a very interesting question because I know from other work I've done that it's a very big issue. How do perimenopause and menopause affect women's ability to sleep? And what's the minimum amount of sleep someone can reasonably function on? I guess that's partly tied to the menopause question and partly general. So, Dekian, do you want to tackle that? And Ben, do you then want to talk about some of your experience? You gave us a little teaser that sometimes older people find there's more stress on the body. So, Dekian, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, so menopause-related changes in sleep have been documented. In general, changes in the endocrine system will affect sleep, and we see this when we go from pre-pubertal to pubertal ages, and we see this around the menopause. We also see it across the menstrual cycle. So there is little doubt that hormonal changes have an effect. With the menopause come the hot flashes, temperature regulation and sleep are intimately related. So that's another possible cause of those sleep disturbances. What to do about it is a slightly more difficult question, and certainly for me to answer, but there is a literature around this. In terms of what's the optimum hours of sleep or minimum hours of sleep to get so that we can function optimally. Well, two things. if you take away sleep from a young person or an older person, the young person will be more impaired than the older person. Yeah, that's relatively well documented. In terms of what happens with your performance, I think there's a little bit of a misconception here. It's for many people possible to perform at reasonable levels, even though they are sleep restricted. But if you ask them, it will take them much more effort to perform at that level. Yeah. So what I tell my students is, if you want to have an effortless life, you should get enough sleep. So what I'm trying to say is asking about performing at a certain level. That's one question, but the better question is, how easy is it for you to do your daytime task, and how is that affected by sleep duration?
So Ben, do you give special advice to women experiencing menopause, perimenopause at work or?
So the advice often is quite similar, but some bits of it become more important. So, particularly the point you've mentioned already around kind of temperature, regulation. We often talk about kind of coincidental idea around people assume they might need to have the same bedding as their partner, and actually to set your bedroom up for you individually, and if that means separate duvets, you can have the right temperature. It's often real basic things like that, understanding that you might need something different. And yeah, just generally with aging, both men and women have, hormonal changes they age. Also with shift workers, there's just the build up, the effects of shift work kind of build up over time as a kind of pressure on the body. But yeah, in terms of the management of it, it's a lot of the similar tips around, re-looking at your bedtime routine, your diet, your exercise, your light environment, all this kind of, classic stuff, and often kind of re-motivating people. People can very easily get in a rut, with their sleep feeling like it's kind of, incurable, or they do things the way they do them. And so, a big part of what we're doing is not necessarily brand new science, but just the motivation to try and, have a fresh go at improving some of your sleep habits.
Paul Golden, I think we answered your question there. Right, I'm going to move on because Yvonne, we need you now. I'm at the point, having listened to these two, where I'm ready to go and fire everybody who works for me who's under 35 and say, unfortunately, you need to come back in a few years' time when I can rely on you a bit more, despite any problems you might be having sleeping. From an HR point of view, am I thinking down along the right tracks?
Oh, it's so interesting to have seen all that research, Mark, and thanks for the intro and the input, everybody, so far, because there's so much ageism in the workplace, and it all revolves around, older people are less likely to learn, less able to train, less able to take on new stuff. But there's new evidence, like we've heard today, that really gives a positive shout out for them. So just in terms of my presentation, I haven't got slides today, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the lived experience of sleep disturbance and what it means for workplace well-being. And as a long-term longevity practitioner, I want to start by reframing how we think about sleep disturbance. In the workplace, we often treat poor sleep as a personal lifestyle issue, something that individuals should fix for themselves with better habits or more discipline. But sleep disturbance is not just a private problem. It's a lived and embodied experience that directly affects cognition, emotional regulation, metabolic health, and long-term disease risk, all of which show up at work every single day. When we talk to employees about sleep, they rarely describe it in these clinical terms. They describe more about how they feel. They talk about lying awake at 3 a.m. with racing thoughts about deadlines. They talk about waking unrefreshed, feeling foggy in meetings and irritable with colleagues, or emotionally flat. They talk about relying on caffeine to function and then feeling wired and exhausted. And over time, this type of behaviour creates a cycle of under-recovery that erodes both performance and well-being in the workplace. And from a longevity perspective, chronic sleep disturbance is not benign. Even modest persistent sleep deprivation increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, insulin resistance, depression, burnout, and cognitive decline. And importantly for employers, it also reduces attention span, decision-making quality, creativity, and psychological safety. Employees may still be present, but they're operating at maybe a fraction of their capacity. What's often missed is that sleep disturbance is not just caused by individual lifestyle choices, as we've looked at already. It's shaped often through work culture. High cognitive load, for example, constant digital availability, late night emails, time zone demands, and job insecurity, as well as having inadequate resources, can all activate stress physiology. And when the nervous system's in a state of chronic stress, the brain struggles to downshift into restorative sleep, and telling people to get their 6, 7, 8 hours without addressing these systemic drivers can feel dismissive. So what does that mean for employer-led wellbeing programs? I would stress 4 key points here, and I've been in the wellbeing and retirement consulting world and longevity world for over 40 years now, just retired last year. But I'd say there are 4 things that we need to focus on. And the first is about acknowledging the lived experience, not just the science. Education matters, but empathy matters more here sometimes. Employees need to feel that sleep struggles are understood as a normal response to modern work pressures, not their own personal failure. And that reduction of stigma can increase engagement with programs that might intervene. Secondly, the most impactful sleep-focused wellbeing programs go well beyond just sleep hygiene tips like regulating your temperature. They address stress regulation. So this includes teaching practical tools for down-regulating the nervous system, such as cognitive offloading, breath work, and structured wind-down routines, but also examining workload design, job design, recovery time, like we heard about from Ben, about the structure of the job and expectations around responsiveness. Sleep improves when people feel psychologically safe enough to rest. Thirdly, programs should recognise that sleep's a keystone behaviour. Improving sleep quality has a multiplier effect. Better mood, better metabolic health, improved resilience, reduced absenteeism. And from a longevity lens, sleep is one of the highest return investments an employer can make, not just for short-term productivity, but for sustaining that healthy, capable workforce over decades. And fourth, finally, leadership modelling is critical. If senior leaders glorify exhaustion or reward constant availability, no wellbeing programs will succeed. And as your kind introduction mentioned, it was my badge of honour to get 4 or 5 hours sleep per night for decades. And as an extremely busy consultant that worked across the globe, that was the norm. And glorifying that exhaustion and rewarding constant availability was part and parcel of the culture. But conversely, leaders can model boundaries, prioritising recovery. They can speak openly about sleep. And if they do, it gives employees permission to do the same. Addressing sleep disturbance at work isn't just about pushing people to optimise themselves harder. It's about creating the right conditions to make recovery possible, where employers design wellbeing programs that respect the lived experience of sleep disruption. Menopause is a good example there, because it does change, and they support genuine recovery. They don't just improve sleep, they're improving the support of long-term health, engagement, and human longevity. In closing, I just identify some key target groups and industries and maybe particular jobs that are susceptible. And we heard some really good examples there from you, Ben. The healthcare and emergency services, for example, constantly on alert, constantly on call. They can have massive sleep disruption. Leaders and execs, high cognitive load. The same with knowledge workers in law, technology, the consulting industries, all of whom are paid by the hour. You're on the clock, time is money. Gig workers and shift workers. Gig workers particularly feel potential job insecurity. Where's my next project coming from? Self-employment brings its own demands. And I'd just highlight maybe 2 groups that you could segment out to give particular emphasis to, and that's high performers in the organisation. They're often put on fast track programs, so why not think about sleep as part of the high performance fast track program, and also for neurodivergent employees in the workplace, where we know that sleep can be particularly challenging and difficult. So, in summary, addressing good sleep is not just good medicine, it's good business. And if we get time, I can signpost some useful resources in the Q&A.
Thanks, Yvonne, and maybe post them in the chat, or that would be great. Just before we come to Jesse, Grace Feeney asked a question which directly addresses something you were talking about. I mean, you said often people get 4 or 5 hours sleep for 30 or 40 years of their working life. What do we know about the impact of that on brain health and dementia risks and healthy aging?
Well, I need to be dipping more and more into that. As I say, I think I'm really surprised and amazed at how much difference retirement has made to me. And it probably took me the first 4 or 5 months of retirement to actually acknowledge that how did I survive on 4 or 5 hours a night? How did I survive? Why did I do that?
Mm.
And what impact has that had on me long term? The initial research I've done shows that you can make up lost ground. So I'm getting my 7 or 8 hours a night now, as much as I can. I don't need naps anymore. I'm on a really good new nutrition program. That really promotes things like protein, fats, and carbs at the same meal so that you don't get that carb low. I get severe blood sugar low dips. So I've not felt the need for naps and tiredness throughout the day, interestingly, since I've been on that nutrition program, which is something else we could maybe look at. But I'm hoping all is not lost with that severe deprivation over decades.
Yeah. Well, that's Jesse. I mean, often when people have trouble sleeping, um, they reach for the bottle, and I think sadly GPs often tell them to. There's a British comedian who tells this joke that I warned you all. It's one of the three jokes I know. That she said, "Oh, I'm very proud of myself because I went to the GP and said I'm having trouble sleeping, and the GP said, well, have a nice small glass of wine before you go to bed." And she said, and I'm very proud of myself. And even on nights when I'm too drunk to climb the stairs by myself, I still get that small glass of wine in. And I think sadly that is the approach to insomnia a lot of people take. It's not a good one, right?
No, and I think we see this a lot in the literature. Lots of people use alcohol as a coping tool for kind of disrupted sleep, even though it does actually worsen sleep quality. So yeah, so I just want to say thank you everyone for attending the webinar today, and thank you to the other presenters. As Mark mentioned in the introduction, I work for Drinkaware, which is an independent charity tackling alcohol harm in the UK. And we can probably all assume that too much alcohol can have a negative impact on our health as we age, and in particular, it can impact the quality of our sleep. When we talk about sleep and alcohol, the message from the wider evidence is quite consistent. Alcohol can help people fall asleep more quickly, but it almost always leads to poorer quality sleep later in the night. So people may sleep for the same number of hours, but they don't feel as rested when they wake up. So let's just break that down a little bit. So alcohol affects the body's natural sleep rhythms. Some people may find alcohol can help them fall asleep faster, at least initially. It can act as a sedative, slowing down brain activity, making you feel relaxed or drowsy. However, this effect is quite short-lived and comes at the cost of more fragmented, lower quality sleep, causing people to wake up feeling less rested, and even if they have slept for several hours. Alcohol interferes with the most kind of restorative stages of sleep, particularly the REM, so the rapid eye movement state of sleep, which plays a vital role in memory, mood, and cognitive function. We've spoken a little bit about that today. So as a result of alcohol interfering with REM sleep, you're likely to wake up feeling less refreshed even after what seems like a full night's sleep. And we see evidence of this in our own research. So every year, Drinkware conducts a sort of state of the nation survey called the Monitor. And we normally survey around 10,000 adults, and it's representative of the UK population. So the monitor looks at what UK adults think about drinking, what people drink, the impacts on health, the settings in which people are drinking in. And in 2025, we found that poor quality sleep is the most common effect people notice after drinking. So 30% of UK drinkers reported poor sleep after drinking the past year. This is about 13, just under 14 million people. This is followed by feeling less energetic or productive the next day, and feeling hungover or unwell. For people drinking above the Chief Medical Officer's guidelines, which recommends that men and women keep their intake below 14 units of alcohol per week, which is roughly around 6 pints of kind of average strength beer or 6 medium glasses of wine, the impact is even more pronounced. Among those kind of exceeding these limits, nearly half reported experiencing poor sleep. Women are slightly more likely to report poor sleep after drinking than men, so about 31% compared to 29% of men, and this rises to 52% and 46% for women and men drinking above the CMO guidelines. Quite importantly, 16% of drinkers said that poor sleep after drinking had actually made them want to cut down their drinking. This means that sleep can actually be kind of a real motivator for change. So in terms of kind of younger and middle-aged adults, they are much more likely than older adults to say that they've experienced poor sleep after drinking in the last year. In some age groups, it's around 4 times more likely. So that's about 40% of those aged 25 to 34 and 39% of those aged 35 to 54 are 4 times more likely to say this than drinkers aged 76 or over, which was around 11%. This can reflect different drinking patterns, such as heavier nights out or having kind of higher consumption on the days that people are drinking. But sleep and alcohol are still very relevant for older adults. As we get older, sleep naturally becomes lighter, more fragmented. And although alcohol is often used as a sleeping aid, the evidence shows that it can help you fall asleep more quickly, like I mentioned at the start, but it actually worsens your sleep quality and makes nighttime disruption more likely. We haven't done our own specific research on this, but as we've alluded to now, we see this a lot in shift working groups, particularly older nurses who are likely to use alcohol as a coping tool. And I'll finish my part by just saying that the evidence so far has shown that alcohol is not an aid for sleep. It's a short-term sedative that can reduce sleep quality in the moment and in the long run, which impacts healthy aging. Small changes can make a real difference. So avoiding alcohol close to bedtime, having drink-free days, and just cutting down overall can help improve sleep. And for many people, better sleep is one of the most immediate benefits that they notice when they drink less. So thank you for listening and thank you to ILC. I'm passing back over to Mark.
Thank you, Jesse. Really interesting. Thanks so much. Isabel McKenzie, I think, says something, Yvonne, that follows up on what you were talking about. She's saying, healthy aging, on the subject of healthy aging, financial poverty can make a huge difference to older people. Exercise and social interaction, we know, make a difference. We're living longer, but not necessarily well. Maybe we need to start prevention earlier on. And I think that sort of echoes everything you were saying, that Isabel's point there. And I know that the American Heart Association, and I think some of the diabetes groups in Europe have now added sleep alongside exercise and nutrition as key factors in preventing heart disease and diabetes. So I know the AHA puts sleep, the American Heart Association puts sleep right alongside exercise and diet. We've got lots of questions to get through. Just on the polls you all filled out, let me just have a quick look. I think most of you are getting 6 to 7 hours sleep a night, but about 1 in 5 of you are getting really quite short sleep. So that was interesting to hear, and I'll tell you about the quality of sleep in a minute. On the Q&A question, let's see. Here we go. So Hannah McGurk asks a question that Kian, you might find a bit red hot, but here it is. If someone's concerned about sleeping too much later in life, would you recommend speaking to a GP or should they go and find a specialist?
Well, the question is somebody concerned about sleeping too much? Or, yeah, concerns is a concern. I would probably say, do you have any idea why this is happening? Also, if you have always been a long sleeper, uh, then still sleeping relatively long when you're a bit older isn't necessarily uh, uh, an indication that something is wrong. There's quite a bit of literature that shows that changes in sleep patterns are more indicative than just sleep patterns. That's what I will say. But if there is a sudden change in your sleep patterns, that would be something to probably look into in a little bit more detail. Let me put it that way.
Got it. Got it. Yvonne, do you think that sometimes HR teams underestimate the cumulative impact of poor sleep because it's not something that tends to be acute? I mean, I know I had an HR manager who said she was very worried about the relationship between road traffic accidents and poor sleep, but
Mm.
most of the impacts are not acute. They're things that you see over time. Do you think that helps to disguise the impact of poor sleep?
I think HR have really not yet got to grips with sleep as part of the wellbeing program, to be honest. I think we've seen lots of work around healthy eating, around exercise, subsidized gym, etc. But we've not really seen an awful lot yet of development around really good sleep work. And I think, as I say, since I retired and the light bulb went on and I realized, oh my goodness, this is how I've lived and thrived, it's become a much more important issue to me. And that's why I was really keen to come on today and talk about it, because I think in terms of the well-being pillars, we should put sleep front and center, back up there. It impacts so many health
Mm.
and mental health outcomes. So that's my thoughts.
Jesse, Drinkaware's research, what does it reveal about the relationship between alcohol sleep disruption and risks such as sleep apnea and snoring?
Yeah, so this is actually quite fitting because last night I had the worst night's sleep because my partner went out with his colleagues, had a few drinks, came back and snored the entire evening. So in terms of lived experience, this is very, very true. It's very difficult because it's all about sleep hygiene, and I can see a question in the polls around that as well. I think if you do suffer from snoring, or if you do, it's actually better to speak to a GP or a doctor about it because sometimes it can actually be related to something more serious than actually drinking or eating. It could be related to maybe you smoke, or it could be related to just like what's been activities throughout the day. So yeah, so alcohol in particular can heighten any of those concerns or issues.
And as Jack Eddy says, that there may be rare issues or there may be chronic pain or
Yeah.
other things that are masked by that. So that's really important point. Couple of more questions and then we'll have to wrap up, but it's been fascinating. Ben Detkian, Stuart Price asks, why do people regularly wake up a number of times during the night? I assume that means your sleep is not as good. And there's a related question here from Carolyn Heaney about whether cumulative sleep, so sleeping in blocks, is as good as sleeping in one long go. So who wants to start on that? Dekian?
Yeah, well, so in terms of the number of times waking up at night, whether that's a problem, yes or no, well, certainly not necessarily. If you look at more natural sleep patterns, where there are no real constraints on sleep, or for example, when people go on holidays and have plenty of time to spend in bed, yeah, they may wake up now and then. Some people also have to go to the bathroom. So I think we shouldn't scaremonger people about waking up a few times every night. But one of the questions is, why do you wake up? And somebody already mentioned sleep apnea or snoring. If you have relatively severe sleep apnea, you may wake up after such an event. Yeah. And then the awakening is something to be concerned about sleeping in blocks or cumulative or whatever. The only thing I will say, the important thing is how much sleep do you get per 24 hours? Yeah. And it's probably best to get it in one block. But if there isn't enough time at night, sleep some hours during the day as well.
Lovely. Well, look, we are out of time. I want to thank my panel enormously. Professor Derkjan Dijk, Ben Lumley, Ivan Sonsino, and Jesse Kula. I want to thank ILC and I want to thank very much all our participants who put such good questions in. We did get to most of them. Yvonne has put a number of links in the Slido Q&A if you want to take them down. I apologize to those of you we didn't get to. But I'm sure we will be returning to this topic given the extent of interest in it. And I just want to leave you with a final thought that the Future of Aging conference is coming up on the 5th of March. It's in person only, but it's in London from 9:15 to 4:15. I know that ILC UK would love to see you there, and it promises to be a fascinating day. And no doubt sleep will make an appearance after today. A couple of you said you can't see the links. We will make sure that we find a way to get those to you. So just email us and we'll get them back to you. Thank you again to everybody. I've learned a great deal. I hope you all have as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.
Bye.